do it.
Okay, so don't forget to turn the suction on. You can certainly use high and low speed, but primarily we're going to start with high speed. And just before I start polishing, just like we did with our trimming, you're going to start with your biggest wheel and work your way down to the smaller one, and perhaps the felt cone in the end. And this should be moistened. So I'll put this in water when we're ready to use it. Okay, suction, high speed, mask, eye protection, protect your clothes, and we're ready to polish. Generally, we're going to start polishing the periphery of the denture, so it really doesn't matter if you do the upper or the lower. We're going to start with the periphery and work our way towards the gingival margins. You might want to shuffle your pumice around a little bit because it tends to settle. Remember, this doesn't do the work. This does. So don't get stuck on just using just the wheel. So I'm going to place some pumice on top of the denture, start somewhere and make my way around. I'm putting a lot of pressure here. I'm not being very gentle, but I'm being mindful not to polish the tissue-bearing surface. When it comes to the frenal attachments, I'm going to rotate my denture, so I'm using the edge of the wheel to get inside that little space. So I'm going around the periphery, but don't over rotate so you're polishing the underside of the denture. Be sure, be careful. Now look what happens in here. Even though I prep my wheel, there's still lint that comes off. So just kind of wipe that away. Remember to always reapply the pumice. And we want to have a very smooth, rounded consistency. Now, depending on the finish of your dentures after you trim them, this might take you longer, or this might take you no time to polish. So, the smoother you finish things, the easier it is to polish. Remember to keep applying the pumice as it washes off. And also make a conscious effort to hold the denture relatively close to where you're pumicing. So therefore, if I'm polishing this area, I'm not going to hold it over here. I'm going to hold it relatively close to where I'm applying the pressure. That way, you minimize the risk of this thing flying off your hands and possibly breaking. So again, I'm kind of pinching my hands together around the area where I'm polishing. So I'm localizing the pressure. So I'm going to make my way around. And again, I'm going to use the edges of the wheel to get inside the frenal attachments. And as you're using this, your pumice might get a little dry. And as you can see it here, it doesn't have that creamy consistency that I started off with. So I'm just going to introduce a little more water. Otherwise, if you don't have enough water, what will happen, you will increase the heat on the dentures and possibly warp them. So I'm just going to go over it one more time, very quickly now. And we're looking for the very smooth finish to the touch. Okay, from here on, I'm going to turn it over to the opposite side and round off that periphery from the other side. Be careful not to touch the teeth because this is very abrasive. Because it's such a big diameter, it spins at a very high rate. And if you touch the teeth up here, you will over polish the teeth. I'm putting a lot of pressure here, quite a bit of pressure, and reapply the pumice. I'm going to add a little more pumice to this, so I'm going to turn this off. Set my denture off to the side, and I'm going to add some more pumice because it feels like I'm scrambling to pick up enough pumice. And reintroduce some water. Bring everything back down. Mix everything together again so we have this creamy, almost a bit watery consistency. Here we go again. Take note where you start so you can come back to the same place. So if you start at the midline, make your way all the way around and come back at the midline. Because I'm holding the case relatively close to where I'm polishing it, there's very little risk of this case flying off my hand. So we're just doing the periphery for now. This becomes a little more difficult to get in here, so make sure that you have a fresh wheel so you can get inside this lingual extension. You can scoop up the pumice with the denture itself, like so, instead of with your hands. This is sometimes more convenient. So I'm only concentrating on the periphery roll for now. So I'm going back and forth. My hands are always moving. Now I'm trying to get inside the little lingual concavity that we incorporated. And I'm going to go over the retromolar pad, stay away from the teeth. But take note where I'm holding the case. I'm holding it here. I'm not trying to polish this area and hold it here. Hold it close to where you're trying to polish. Are you going to polish your skin off a little bit? You probably will. But that's part of the job, I guess. It'll grow back. Don't over polish it. Now I'll move on to the other retromolar pad. Try to polish as much as you can with a big wheel. If I could gauge the amount of force that I'm putting against the wheel and the denture, I would say it's probably about 7-8 pounds worth of force, which is quite a bit. Now I'm getting a little bit closer to the teeth. Not too close. And again, don't forget to keep applying pumice. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot of heat with just a rag wheel, and really it's not effective. Now, the little concavity that we have in here, running along the facial surface of the denture. I'm going to use the edge of the wheel to give it a bit of a polish. Very little pressure though. And I'm going to turn it on each side. And again, I'm being very conscious of not to polish the teeth now with this wheel, because you can damage the teeth. Just a little bit. Now I'm going to get a little bit closer to the margins on the lingual side, and I'm using the edge of the wheel to get inside the margins. And this is where you start appreciating a really nice wax up. I didn't have a lot of trimming here to do, so there's very little polishing for me to do in here. Almost negligible. And in here, because can you imagine trying to get in that little fine space with this big wheel? You're gonna over polish the teeth. There's no way around it. So concentrate on the wax up into a nice smooth finish, and you won't have that issue. Just gonna go over it one more time, clean it up before I move on to the bristle brush. I think that's good. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn off the unit. If you have a hard time removing it, just grab the other spindle on the other side and pull the wheel towards you. It's one directional. I don't use this bristle brush very often. It's quite big. So I'm just going to move on to the small one. Remember, there's a larger diameter on the inside and a smaller on the outside. Make sure you put the larger diameter towards the spindle. I'm going to initially mount this at a high speed so it catches. But I would say most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm going to use this bristle brush on low speed. So I turned my unit down to 1500 RPM. Just going to remix this, and it feels pretty dry, so I'm going to add some more water, a little bit more. So it looks wet. Okay, now I'm going to start on the inside. And this takes a lot of pumice. And this wheel now, you're gonna have to touch the teeth a little bit, but it's a lot more forgiving than this one, okay? So I'm getting a little bit closer. And try to approach any micro scratches that you see from both sides, not just one side. So I'm doing it from the top, I'm doing it from the bottom if I can, I'm doing it from the front and from the posterior, whichever way you can. Cradle the case in your hands. Now I can get in here a little bit closer inside the lingual concavity with this smaller wheel. And same thing on the other side. So make sure you keep adding applying the pumice as it washes away. Now I'm going to move to the facial side, almost at an angle. I'm making a conscious effort not to pumice the teeth right now. And you can start to see that the case becomes shinier and shinier because of the fact that you're taking out the scratches. And I'm trying to get inside that groove that we created between the peripheral roll and the gingival roll a little bit closer with this wheel. It allows me to do that. And I'm going to take, again, the edge of the wheel and get interproximately, ever so slightly. So if I was using 7-8 pounds worth of force with this wheel, now I'm probably down to 1. Very light pressure. And the finer finish that you had with your wax up, then this becomes really easy. Because we did selective grinding on the occlusal surfaces of the teeth, there's some rough spaces on top of them. So ever so lightly, from both directions, I'm going to use the small bristle brush and pumice a little bit on top and a little bit on the incisal edges, not much. See how that looks? It's starting to look really smooth. Now the inside, you got to be careful not to over polish the inside. You're going to polish the inside ever so lightly. So we're going to use a little bit of pumice, and I'm going to use maybe half a pound of force here. And make sure that when you are, just going to turn it down so you can hear me a little more clear. I'm going to pumice the inside using very little pressure. And when you do this, make sure that you're using a new wheel, fairly new wheel, because the new wheel will have more flex to it. As the wheel wears out, it will abrade a lot more. And as this wheel, while we're on that subject, as this wheel wears out, don't throw it out. It becomes very useful, especially interproximately on the facial and lingual surfaces. Okay? So let's turn it back on. Low speed. And then back in here, ever so lightly. Ever. If you overdo it, you will alter the fit of the denture, and it defeats the whole purpose of what we've done up until now. Just gonna give it a once over, just to get a better idea if there are any scratches. And sometimes, when you get to the high shine portion, you're gonna notice those scratches, so you might have to go back and forth, which is quite okay. But in good time, you'll know to eliminate all of the scratches, so you should be able to do it in just one shot. Okay, so that looks pretty good. All right, now, in reality, when I was using this big wheel, I would continue with the upper and finish the upper, so I'm not going back and forth, interchanging the wheels. But for demo purposes, I just wanted to show you the lower all at once. But you can certainly do both at the same time. So now I'm going to move to the upper denture, and I'm going to do it a little more real time. Okay. Now this wheel has worn out a little bit. So the flex now with this wheel is a little less. So we can cut the first row of stitching here, remove it, and make it a little more flexible. I'll show you that in this next little bit video.